What is the scariest story you know that is 100% true?
I was working the evening shift at a gas station when a man stumbled in, completely disoriented. He had a nasty gash on his head and seemed confused about where he was. I didn't see any sign of a car accident nearby, so I figured maybe he'd just fallen or something. Now we were supposed to stay inside the glass-shielded register area whenever a customer was in the store. Safety policy and all that. But he looked hurt, so I stepped out to help while I called the police and EMS. They arrived quickly, checked him out, and suspected a possible skull fracture before taking him to the ER. A few hours later, some cops came back for coffee. They told me the man wasn't a victim at all. He'd been hit in the head with a baseball bat while trying to break into a little girl's bedroom. Turns out, he was wanted for assault and murder in 2 other states. After that night, I never left the register area after dark again.
The Lake Nyos disaster. Lake Nyos periodically releases a cloud of invisible carbon dioxide that suffocates everything within a 16-mile radius. In 1986, more than 1,700 people, along with all their livestock, died without even understanding what was happening to them.
My high school science teacher had served in the Peace Corps and was one of the first people to come across the village after the Lake Nyos disaster. He said it was unbelievably eerie. All the flies and mosquitoes had died and the silence was absolute.
Just imagine being near a lake, swimming or standing by the shore, when it suddenly starts to fizz, like someone just shook and opened a giant can of soda. That's basically what happened. Some lakes now have special fountains installed to prevent this kind of deadly buildup from ever happening again.
John List took the lives of his whole family, his wife, mother, daughter, and 2 sons. He meticulously planned the entire thing, canceling all delivery services, excusing the kids from school, and even turning the air conditioning as low as possible to preserve the bodies for as long as he could. After he ended their lives, he placed the bodies in sleeping bags and lined them up. He then wrote a letter to his pastor explaining why he had done it. He left and wasn't heard from again. 18 years later, he was remarried and working in the same profession as before, only this time he didn't have any children. He was finally arrested after a tip was given to the FBI. The craziest part is that, because he had planned it so carefully, the bodies weren't discovered until a month after the tragedy. That gave him a massive head start, allowing him to start a new life in the same career while being heavily involved in a new church in Virginia. It took 18 years to finally capture him.
One of my friends once had someone follow her home, hiding in the bushes so they couldn't be seen. She ran as fast as she could to her house, got inside, and saw that the man was watching from outside. She immediately called the police. They arrived quietly and managed to catch him by surprise. He was carrying handcuffs, a knife, and other disturbing items. When they tested his DNA, it turned out he was linked to several assaults in the area. She credits her sprint training for helping her escape that night, and firmly believes that if she hadn't been fast enough, things could have ended very differently.
In my town in the early 90s, there was a notorious criminal who had everyone in British Columbia, Canada, on edge. My wife's mother, years before I ever met them, was home alone while her husband was away in England, working as an arborist. One afternoon, she was in the laundry room when a man suddenly walked up from the basement, completely startling her. Terrified, she shouted, "What are you doing here?" He calmly said he was a friend of her husband and had just come by to see if he was home, claiming her husband told him he could just walk in. She knew that wasn't true. Thinking quickly, she told him her husband was just at the store and would be back any minute. The man said he'd wait outside. As soon as he stepped out, she locked the door and called the police. But he was already gone when they arrived. 2 weeks later, the suspect was caught, and when his mugshot appeared on TV, she realized it was the exact same man who had been in her house. His name was Terry Driver.
My family has a similar story, and I'm pretty sure some of you true crime fans might figure out who it is before the reveal, because their story is quite unique. When my parents were in college, they took a trip down to Florida. They had met through mutual friends and were traveling together, though they hadn't gone on a date yet. My dad and one of his friends were supposed to meet my mom and her friends at a hotel, but being carefree college guys, they lost track of time and realized it was impossible to get there on foot. So they decided to hitchhike, and a car with 2 women stopped to pick them up. Everything seemed fine until the driver asked if it was okay to stop for gas. My dad and his friend said, "Sure, no problem." She pulled into a gas station, filled up her tank, then suddenly jumped back into the car and sped off, stealing the gas with 2 hitchhikers in the back seat. They were starting to panic when she reached under her seat, pulled out a gun, and asked, "We're not going to have a problem, are we?" My dad and his friend quickly shook their heads. What else could they do? She ended up driving them straight to their hotel and dropped them off without a scratch. They didn't think much of it afterward, until the news started reporting on a serial offender in Florida named Aileen Wuornos. My dad took one look at her photo and instantly recognized her as the woman who had driven them that day. He's convinced the only reason she didn't harm them was because they were respectful and polite, while most of her victims were reportedly men who tried to take advantage of her. TLDR. Aileen Wuornos is the reason my dad made it to his first date with my mom on time.
Naglaria is terrifying to me. You can get it just from getting water up your nose while swimming in a lake. Or, I've heard, but I'm too lazy to check, there have been people who got it from using a neti pot.
The childhood best friend of one of my exes passed away this way. Maybe not from this exact amoeba, but from a waterborne one that attacked him neurologically. I didn't know such a thing even existed at the time. I had no idea. So when my ex told me about it, I laughed. I assumed he was joking, being mean, or lying to me. No, it was absolutely true. And I was the one being awful. I've had an absolute horror of these amoebas ever since. When signs say, "Do not swim," there's a really good chance they're warning about something like this. Don't swim, people. Seriously, don't swim. And of course, that poor little boy can't be blamed for what happened. It's just absolutely heartbreaking.
My dad and some friends got drunk and went for a drive on some back roads, going as fast as the truck would go when they were teenagers. My dad was slightly less drunk than the others and eventually demanded they let him get out. They pulled over, and he and one girl got out. The two of them started walking toward town while the other three sped off in the opposite direction. Less than a mile up the road from where they stopped was an extremely sharp turn, which the truck missed, crashing into a tree at nearly triple-digit speed. Two of them lost their lives on impact. And the only reason the third survived was because they crashed in front of a house where two doctors lived. The survivor was paralyzed and lost his leg and part of his arm, spending 8 months in the hospital before passing away. This was in the 1960s, when medical care wasn't what it is today. When I first got my driver's permit, my dad took me to that corner to explain the importance of driving safely. It gave me goosebumps to think how close he came to being in that truck. He said the driver's father had what remained of the vehicle hung up in the center of town for months afterward as a warning to everyone.
That's terrifying. I narrowly missed a situation like this years ago. I was hanging out with a friend at the bars, and afterward we decided to head back to his place to relax, smoke, and play some video games. His roommate came home from work. He was a bartender, and told us he was heading out to the bars, asking if we wanted to join him. He said he'd drive. We went back and forth, but eventually decided to stay in. It turned out the roommate had been drinking heavily at work, though we couldn't tell at the time. Later that night, he flipped his Jeep off an overpass and dropped more than 20 feet. The entire back of the Jeep, where I would have been sitting, was crushed into the front seats. The roll bar collapsed into the passenger side. He suffered severe brain injuries and spent the next few years relearning how to walk and talk. He's still not the same person he used to be. My friend and I came terrifyingly close to sharing a similar, or even worse, fate.
This is a hometown story that has stayed with me. It happened right around the corner from where I grew up, maybe a 2-minute drive away. Judy Kirby ended the lives of 6 children and 1 adult by intentionally driving the wrong way on a divided highway in an attempt to take her own life. She had been hospitalized for depression and had just ended a relationship with her ex-husband's brother. Reports also suggested she was involved in illegal activity and feared an imminent arrest. That day, she picked up her sister's son, who was celebrating his 10th birthday. She then loaded her 3 children into the car, supposedly to pick up a gift for her nephew. Instead, she disappeared with all of them. A short time later, 911 started receiving calls about a car speeding the wrong way down the highway. 90 seconds later, there was a devastating head-on collision with another vehicle driven by a father who had 2 children and a friend of theirs along for the ride. The crash completely destroyed both cars. The only survivors were Kirby herself and the extra child who had been riding in the other vehicle. It was one of the most heartbreaking tragedies my town had ever seen. Kirby was sentenced to 215 years in prison.
Nutty Putty Cave in Utah was permanently sealed in 2009 after a man named John Jones became trapped upside down in a narrow passage while spelunking. By the time rescuers reached him, he had been inverted for so long that the blood had drained from his legs, making any extraction extremely dangerous. The only potential way to free him would have involved breaking his legs, a move that likely would have sent him into fatal shock. After being stuck for 28 hours, John passed away inside the cave. His body remains there to this day, entombed within the rock where he became trapped.
My wife arrived at her parents' house, where she was staying at the time to help with her father's health issues. When she got inside, No one else was home. She stopped in the first room near the entrance, the one with the computers. Instead of going further into the house, she sat down and started browsing the internet when one of the cats came in. Her cat, to be precise. This cat was the most laid-back animal you could imagine. He loved everyone and never picked fights or got aggressive. He would literally lie down and let squirrels throw pecans at him without reacting. But not that night. That night, he stood between my wife and the entrance to the rest of the house, growling and hissing, ready to defend her from something unseen. My wife realized this was incredibly strange, so she picked up her cat and left the house. Outside, she spotted a police car patrolling down the street and flagged them down. She explained what happened, and the officers told her to stay in the cruiser while they checked the house. They discovered the back door wide open, which was alarming since her family never left it unlocked, let alone open. Later, she learned that the police were actively searching for a dangerous individual who had been spotted in the neighborhood that night, which explained why the patrol had been nearby. Super spooky. Life pro tip: always trust the cat.